Thank you very much, Professor Han, for the opportunity, and also like to thank the WMU and also the Government of Korea for the opportunity to have the FFA Secretariat come along, join the party, see what's happening here, and expose some of the great work. I like the work that the word that was used by the gentleman. Fantastic work that has been done in the space of fisheries, MCS, fisheries conservation management measures, adopted, pushed from the national, sub-regional, all the way to the presentation that we had from Lara. So you may have heard the name FFA a couple of times earlier in this session. There were some speakers as well in previous last week, touching base on the fisheries management. And I also have a colleague here attending, Jude from the Observer program. This presentation is quite a challenging theme. Challenges in distant enforcement and distant water fishing nations in the Pacific region. I have to be really careful with what I say because these are our stakeholders. But the opportunity to have outlined some of this great work is all credit to what the members have done. 17 member countries that have committed to cooperation, collaboration for around 45 years to get us to where we are now. And we're not too bad in terms of enforcement challenges. What you will see from this presentation is, I'm not gonna put everything out there. We'll keep some that are very sensitive to our relevant forums in the FFA forum for us to discuss, but these are just highlights of the challenges that we have in our integrated MCS regime and enforcement practices. That's the content of what I intend to cover today. So before we dive into the enforcement challenges, I want to touch base on some of the following off that presentation from Dr. Lara on the WCPFC MCS regimes. Just some basics to provide you a background of what's happening, what are we required to enforce, and how did we come up with these sort of challenges as coastal states, ownership of 17 member countries, EEZs, and the high seas. We have that shared responsibilities as members of the Commission with some flag states as well. I will touch as well on the integrated MCS framework, so building along what has been adopted at the WCPFC and list down all the challenges. That's a highlight of all the challenges that I will be touching base on. If we do have time, we'll cover some technology engagements in the space of improving our integrated monitoring and surveillance in the Pacific, as well as the help that is being provided by our partners. But off the back of that, so much work has been done by the 17 member countries in the space of supporting national controls, as well as investments inside the monitoring, surveillance, and the use of technology, with the support of commitment from our members and as well as our technology partners. There was a question in relation to labor standards. The person that's sitting next to me was there at the foundation 4 to 5 years ago, when we started talking about introducing labor controls and welfare inside terms and conditions of license. We didn't know what we're gonna end up to. Look at us 5 years ago. It's heading up to the WCPFC space with a bit of challenges in terms of the adoption at the national level. So it doesn't mean that we're perfect, but we're heading the right direction in the space of welfare of observers and crew. So integrated MCS framework. I'm gonna give you a minute to actually have a look at what I have on the screen. Integrated investment by the Pacific Island countries. Not relying on one tool, but multiple tools. Right from the controls, setting the national legislations, the CMMs in place, and even emerging ones. So starting from the controls. What we have down here. Legislation support that is provided to the members. Having adequate fisheries legislations, the vessel registers that Lara had spoken about at the WCPFC level, the record of fishing vessel, as well as the FFA vessel register that I'll touch base as well. We have legislation reforms. We talked about, there will be Francisco will talk about port state measures, but HMTCs, harmonized minimum terms and conditions to guide members on what should be in the conditions of license and fisheries legislation, to ensure that we're not plagued by vessel operators moving from country to country in gaining access to as fishing license. The next two are I probably call it the fun one, very operational, surveillance and monitoring. That's what I do at the Secretariat level. I provide support to 17 member countries, excluding New Zealand and Australia. They're up there. But 15 member countries that are small island developing states. They have been blessed with the resources, big areas, big EEZs, but also comes with responsibilities. They need help. They need coordination help. They need coordination in terms of surveillance and even investments and leading in some of these tools. Some of those tools, I'll start with the monitoring. There was talks about VMS and AIS. 1992, was it? VMS. We are now moving into closing our gaps, enhancing our vessel tracking tools with the use of technologies, AIS, and even satellite remote sensing technology. There's work that is being developed in the space of electronic monitoring, electronic reporting of catches or even reports from the vessel operators directly to members as coastal states as part of their obligations. So not only real-time reporting, but also placing cameras, which is something that is coming in the space of monitoring. There's fisheries observers, there's a regional surveillance picture, risk assessment, maximizing on a number of MCS data. We heard about registration, license, VMS, transshipment, integrating all those into a picture where it tells you where the high risk, low risk, and minimum medium risk vessels are. So risk assessment approach in our maritime domain awareness picture through the use of the regional surveillance picture. Data analysis, I'll touch base on it, but that's a key priority in terms of where we need to improve moving forward, looking at our IU priority risks. In the space of surveillance, I have to acknowledge the Pacific Maritime Security Program, funded by Australian Defence, providing Guardian Patrol boat programs to 14 of the FFA member countries. Most of them don't have the resources to buy patrol boats. That's a big help in the space of offshore patrol capability. We have the support from our Pacific Quads, France, New Zealand, Australia, and the United States that are providing bilateral engagements and even through the regional operations through the work that we coordinate. So having that surveillance platforms, boarding inspections of vessels, and verifying the actual reporting obligations and what's happening out there, and providing that feedback back to the coordination center. The shipyard agreements, remote sensing technology, it's a big part and big investment from us, looking at the 5% IU risk in specific areas, looking at mainly the high seas of where dark vessels are operating without any VMS or AIS tracking on board those vessels. So ordering satellite technology, radio frequency, optical, and others such as synthetic aperture radar. We have the cooperation. We'll leave the meat of it for tomorrow. There's a theme and session for tomorrow for cooperation and collaboration. But that's what we've invested in terms of surveillance and monitoring. Enforcement, that's where our challenges come in. There is some work, 20 years of investment. We continue to see the challenges in enforcement, capacity building, technology, interpreting the data, prosecution support, fisheries data and intelligence, as well as the listing of IU vessels and the process Lara talked about under the WCPFC convention. That's what we are doing here in the Pacific. 17 FFA member countries have agreed to have a regional framework that guides all of these 17 member countries. So not one gets left behind. Even if there's minimum resources or limited resources, the Secretariat where I work will provide that support to some of these small island developing states, such as Tokelau and Niue, small administrations, providing that services back to those member countries. So it's quite an investment, and it's a great response to IU fishing. Francisco did cover a bit of that in the status of where we are with IU fishing and our priorities. And we are working within that integrated cycle of prioritizing selected tools where we need to put more resources, capacity building, and more financial resources for our member countries. The priority risk, just briefly, I know this is covered already, but the last two studies in 2016 and 21, it's just still pointing towards our licensed fleets, long line fleets, the ability of them to be in compliance with reporting requirements, as well as compliance with terms and conditions of license. So that's our number one priority risk. What's our specific response to it? That's what we list down there. We discuss it on an annual basis on where our investments and focus will be. We talked about redeployment of service, 5% coverage that Lara mentioned on longline fishery. We need to increase that and provide good quality data coverage from the Observer program. Analytical tools, boarding inspections, the emphasis on wherever you're doing the boarding inspection, but a good quality boarding search on a vessel, whether it's in port, out at sea, or in the high seas area, so capacity development. Electronic monitoring, transshipment verifications, maximizing on the data that is coming from the members on transshipment in zone, as well as the WCPFC Secretariat on the high seas transshipment, although there are challenges to be noted. So our regional MCS strategy, this is quite an initiative for us, an excitement early this, I think it was in May this year, we adopted our updated version of our regional MCS strategy in the Pacific. You can scan the code if you want a copy of it. It'll take you to the FFA website. But just briefly out of that, so we've changed the approach from the previous regional MCS strategy, which was focused on tools specific. What tools do we solve this issue? What tools on this issue? One tool. This one is focused on specific objectives. What do we want to achieve by the end of the 5-year plan? So I can read out one example here is our objective number 1, that only vessels we Pacific Island member countries authorized to operate in the Pacific should be here. No one else. So meet the registration requirements, WCPFC, the FFA, and also your license requirement. And then come into, we get our access fees. That's an important one. And then you go out fishing. How do we achieve that objective? So we've got a number of controls that are in place. Registration, AIS, remote sensing, the aerial and surface surveillance that is providing a platform to you for you to achieve that goal. We have 6 objectives and specific actions under that framework, with the ultimate goal that we optimize compliance with fisheries management frameworks in the Pacific region through the implementation of this integrated, the 6 objectives. Quite an impressive work that is done here in the Pacific. The compliance level is already up there, but we want to lift it up by closing out any gaps in the misreporting and non-compliance to terms and conditions of license. So a copy of it is available on the FFA website, and it's a separate workshop itself, and we're on the road to implement a implementation plan that will support the needs of our national MCA strategies, what's coming out. Before getting to the challenges, just quickly on the roles and responsibilities, I think Lara has touched on it. FFA members are quite unique. We're coastal states within the WCPFC convention area, but also some that are flag states. We have 14 member countries that have domestic and foreign fishing vessels that are flag state to operate on the high seas. So it's good to have that distinguished. enforcement as flag states and also as a coastal state. And of course, we have our biggest player inside the Pacific region is the distant water fishing nations flag states that are operating. National conditions of access, very briefly, what are we there to enforce? What are we supporting the members to enforce? So we talked about the HMTCs, and most of it has provisions towards what we already spoke about, the registers. So we've got one on the vessel register, a vessel to be licensed to FFA member, valid license, the WCPFC record of fishing vessel, vessel reporting requirements on VMS, operational MTU, reporting requirements on target species measures, non-target species, ecosystem measures, pollution and waste, transshipment, observers, the obligation for an operator to place and look after an observer on board a vessel in a fishing trip. And the very important one, number 9, catch and effort reporting requirements is a key one inside national conditions, as well as the CMM for vessels operating on the high seas through electronic reporting. So that's the controls itself. Moving on to the challenges now. The biggest one that we have is an area. We're looking at an area of 21 million square kilometers that we're dealing with here in the Pacific. Almost 3 times the land mass of Australia. What a blessing. What a blessing. Within the sits 15 member countries, it ranges from 127 to 3.5 million square kilometers of EEZ. So we've got the highest Kiribati and the lowest as Niue or Samoa. So that responsibility to look after your EEZ, it comes with resources. You have fisheries management with a need for a robust support from monitoring, control, and surveillance at the national level. It comes with resources, the technology that we talked about, the assets, but sometimes it's just too much. Even New Zealand and Australia are struggling to surveil their own EEZs. So it's a big area that we're looking at here, and it requires a lot of resources and support from partners, even Korea, say for example. High seas, a lot more challenging, sort of an overlap in terms of responsibility, but FFA members do have an interest of what's happening in the high seas. What to be done in the EEZ needs to be mirrored in terms of ensuring that the conservation management measures and the approach is effective in terms of conservation of the resources. The second area challenge is the resources. This is an interesting one. We have ongoing surveillance support coordination from the FFA Secretariat. That's the regional surveillance operations through the use of aerial surveillance funded by the Australian Pacific Maritime Security Program and the Pequods. A lot of bilaterals are happening, even before China came in recently. 14 out of 17 members have offshore patrol vessels through the PMSP program. We've got members such as Nauru, Niue, Tokelau, that have no assets. Is that correct? There's one coming, yeah? We've got members as well that haven't had an asset for the last 2 years with the issues they had. Tokelau, Vanuatu, still no offshore patrol boat, and even Samoa for a period of 1.5 years due to carelessness. High cost of relying on cooperative bilateral, very high cost. It's very costly to send a patrol boat from the Quads or even an air asset down to support a SID member country need. So the use of the shipwright agreement, coordination through Operation 365, and even the new treaty subsidiary agreement, just between the members themselves, helping each other in the space of providing resources. With that limited capability, that's what we have on the screen here. with an icon of patrol boat inside that EEZ. We've got some areas that have no surveillance capability from their own national efforts. They're relying on quads. They're relying on others, neighboring countries. The use of technology is a common one. So not too expensive. We buy the technology, we provide the access to the members, and then have that regular monitoring and surveillance happening. The second last one is the challenge in terms of enforcement and action capacity. We do so much in terms of surveillance and monitoring, but when it comes to putting on your investigation hat, there's some challenges there. Capacity, resources, having SOPs, even manuals to follow the process all the way up to the WCPFC, or even your own national legislation. So that's one that is a common one, and we're looking to address that. Limited equipments and resources, so boarding equipments, what do you need? What do you need as an MCS practitioner? Most of the members don't have it. We'll have to rely on donors and coordination from FFA to support a regional project. The communication and awareness with the background, I think it's the slide coming after, is the majority of vessels, 65% of the vessels that are on a good standing FFA register are distant water fishing nation. So you can imagine the scale of your stakeholders that you're dealing with here, mostly from Asia, China, Taiwan, Korea, Philippines, and so forth. So 62% of the vessel captains that are on those vessels are from those Asian countries, so distant water fishing nation. Of course, we have challenges every time we have the awareness of license conditions from English language to their respective language. That's a key one. Making sure that they understand what you're required under your national law and conditions of that license. Pre-fishing inspections, it ties on to the first one. It's impacting on the data quality of the reporting because of the language barrier and communications between foreign captains and you as a coastal state, and also yourself as an MCS practitioner. Think of yourself jumping on board these vessels to do a boarding, and there'll be a significant language barrier and communication. So there's some initiatives to address these that have already been adopted under our regional framework, with the lead from Australia and also our partners in terms of translation, but it has to come from the licensing part as well, ensuring that they understand. Some pictures there of our boarding and what we're dealing with in operations with foreign captains operating in the Pacific. This talks about the number of vessels. It has reduced for a while based on the numbers that was provided on the presentation from Lara. It's great, less vessels. But looking at the Pacific Island countries' licensed vessels, there are around less than that, just about 800 vessels that are on the good standing, and the same for vessels that are licensed within FFA member waters. So challenges in terms of the number of vessels that you come in as a practitioner each day, and you're required to monitor their activity on your EZ, even the adjacent high seas areas. So I posed some question there, hoping that we can have the discussion after, does the number of flag and licensed vessels reflect the resources that you have in your MCS program? Does it match up, or there's a big difference in terms of effort and the MCS resources? I'll skip through this. This was covered by Lara in terms of the number of vessels, but that's a snapshot of what we have in the FFA register. So looking at the top 7 countries that have the most vessels on our FFA register, China, Japan, Taiwan, Panama, Korea, and Fiji, with a balanced distribution among purseine and longline. So what's that telling us? Data access and sharing and transparency, this was picked up in the earlier speakers' presentations, is the ability for member countries to have access to that data. In the Pacific, we have data sharing arrangements that is administered by the FFA on behalf of the 17 member countries. Who do you share data with? Who's authorized? And what sort of process in terms of data security? So we have about 12 members out of the 17, 12 that are sharing unconditionally. We've got 5 members that are sharing reciprocal. The coverage is pretty okay, 89% in terms of sharing across all members. It does go up to 100 when we do surveillance operations, where we get consent from all the FFA member countries. In the WCPFC space, there's still room to improve there in terms of you getting access to the WCPFC in-zone VMS data, as well as the transshipment data. How is that affecting our MCS work? Impact on risk assessment of vessels using multiple data source, as well as port-to-port monitoring and catch and effort validation of fishing vessel trips. Quickly on the IU risks that we're seeing in the last 2 years of operations: unauthorized transshipment, weight differences between transshipment, offloading and a receiving vessel, violation of terms and conditions of license, and as well as a common one, the last 2 is not reporting on VMS and vessels not on the registries. All of these are dealt with at national process, as well as the Article 25. So my last slide is looking at the moving forward. What would this session tell you in terms of MCS and enforcement challenges in the Pacific? So we need to prioritize our approach, looking at boarding activities, review feedback that goes towards the development of CMMs, cooperative surveillance activities, capacity building, enforcement action, ensuring that we complete these enforcement investigation and prosecution against non-compliance actions. And the last one is the legislation and policy support, ensuring that it's adequate and meet the purpose. So that's what I wanted to cover. I do apologize. I wanted to leave some time for any questions, but this, if you scan this, it'll take you to the RFSC work and even some videos on our website that you are welcome to watch in your own free time. But I just wanted to finish off with the work that is done in the Pacific. We owe it all to the members, 17 member countries. Some of them are in the room. The work that has been done over investment, 45 years on the MCS regime, and when you compare it to other regions, I think we're in a good position. Thank you very much, Dr. Han.